Hey guys, how's it going? Now, today we're going to be taking a full tour into my reptile room where you guys are going to be seeing over 20 of my animals. Let's check it out. Something to note, guys, this isn't going to be my full collection. This is just my animals that are a little more temperature sensitive, so things that can't really be over 80 degrees or under, say, 65 at night. So really it's going to be my crested gecko breeders, my frogs, and then again some of the more temperature sensitive ones like my chameleons and mountain horn lizards. However, I will be doing a video of all of my animals as my 100 subscriber special video, so if you guys are interested in that, make sure you go to that lower right hand corner and hit that subscribe button. And starting out our list, we're going to be looking at Gizmo, my Jackson's chameleon. And of course, the first thing you notice when you see Jackson's chameleons are going to be those three horns, which is honestly my favorite part about this species of chameleon. I've had Gizmo for about 2 years now. I got him at an expo as a wild-caught adult. You know, he was pretty banged up, real dehydrated, just not looking 100% great, but over the time that I've had him, I've really nursed him back to health, and he's looking a lot better than he did before. Now, Gizmo's currently housed in a 18 by 18 by 36 Zoom Med screen enclosure, planted with ficus and an umbrella plant. These plants have been doing pretty well. You can kind of tell the ficus over at the end has kind of had its way and kind of burnt out after a while. I know ficuses are a little bit more of a sensitive plant, but for the most part, this thing has been doing great with just a CFL plant light. And moving on, right next to him, we are going to have Gyro, my veiled chameleon. Now, after about a year of owning the Jacksons, I decided I wanted to work with the larger chameleon species, which is where I found Gyro at an expo. He was a 4-year-old breeder that was retired. Funny enough, when I got Gyro, I assumed he was going to have that nasty veiled attitude, as so many do, especially him being a breeder, you know, not much human socialization, but he has been such a personal lizard, you know, very social, wanting to just climb out, hang out on my shoulder and stuff. I don't handle him very often just because for chameleons I don't want them stressed easily, but whenever I need to get in there and clean, give food, water the plants, stuff like that, he's always climbing right up on top of me. And now coming down, we're going to talk about my pair of red-eyed crocodile skinks. These guys are currently housed in a 55-gallon pladarium. You can kind of see with the pump, I used to have a waterfall feature in there that would run down a stream into the water reservoir, but I came into a few issues with it over the weeks of constantly leaking, and then every like 2 to 3 days I would get this massive algae growth that no matter how much I scrubbed, it would always just come back, probably due to the grow lights that I have on top of it. So after, I want to say, 3 to 4 weeks, I ended up just scrapping the idea and opting to put some pork hides in there. I've been breeding these croc skinks for a little over a year now. It was a bit touch and go with the male and female's compatibility. They were hanging out together, but I wasn't getting any copulation or egg laying. But around 6 months ago or so, I got my first egg. It did hatch, however, it did not last very long out of the egg for reasons I'm just not unsure. I don't think it was developed all the way, even though it broke out of the egg. I noticed just some problems with the face and eye, and then a few days to like a week later, it ended up passing on. Now, I did get a second egg from him that has just been doing phenomenal. He's been with me for a few months now, eating great. I've never had any issues with him, and actually I just now, a couple weeks ago, separated him from his parents into his own enclosure. Now moving on to the red-eyed tree frogs, this has got to be my favorite planted bib that I own right now. I'm just in love with how the pothos really grew out. They've got these nice big leafy petals that's just perfect for the frogs. Now out of all the frog species I own, these guys are definitely my favorite. This was always a childhood dream of mine, owning red-eyed tree frogs. You know, I had all the books, I had the wallpaper in my room, the whole shebang, and it's just amazing. You know, years later I'm able to actually own this species. Moving right next to him, we have my white tree frog. Now, this guy was a little bit of a rescue situation. We got him from one of my fiance's friends who just didn't have the time to take care of him anymore, and funny enough, I was actually in the process of looking for white tree frogs, so it was a really win-win situation for me. Currently, he's housed in a 10-gallon tank with, you know, just little fake plants, nothing too big or nothing too much right now. I'm in the process of actually moving them to a larger enclosure that will be a planted bioactive where I'll have a couple more of these guys. The one thing I really gotta love about the white tree frog is that feeding response you get with them, you know, just lunging out, arms flailing, biting at anything they can get their mouth into. It's just always a joy feeding him. And now let's take a look at one of my OG reptiles. This is Viv, my red-tailed boa. I've had her going on 3 years now. I got her as a baby at an expo from Boa Kings, who are just amazing reptile breeders. I highly recommend them for anyone looking for a red-tailed boa. They produce amazing snakes, and the customer service is just out of this world. You know, I bought this snake about, like I said, years ago, and every time I go to the expo, the guy still points me out. He knows who I am, and we always have a nice little chat every time, which, that's just amazing, going from, just buying one snake and the guy and then we always have a nice little chat. So, like I said, Boa Kings for red-tailed boas, I highly recommend that. Now, the boa constrictors have to be one of my favorite species of snakes to own just because of the personality that they have. Going from something like a ball python where it's not moving around so much, it kind of just stays in your hand, to something like the red-tailed boa, who, as you can see, is always roaming around, exploring, just a great, sense of adventure with a snake, especially for the size that they get. She's only about, I think she's just breaking 6 feet now, maybe slightly under, but she still has a few feet to go, and in those few years, she's going to get about, roughly 8 feet, and having an 8-foot snake that still loves to explore is just awesome. Oh, silly Viv. Okay. Red-tailed boas, I recommend them. And now next up we have the emerald tree boa. Now this snake was my fiance's dream reptile to own. She's always been fascinated with just the sheer beauty of the tree boa, with also, those nice big teeth they get as adults. So obviously we had to get one, and a few months later, we got him. Now this guy has been doing amazing. I know that emerald tree boas and green tree pythons have a little stigma of being a little bit of picky feeders, a little tough to feed, but I mean, really, other than the few bumps that we had at the very beginning, this guy's been eating great for us. He's never missed a meal, always healthy bowel movements, and then, like I said, just a gorgeous animal, probably one of my top 5s of the most beautiful snakes. And then speaking of dream reptiles, we have my dream reptile, Hobbs the black and white Argentine tegu. This guy has always been one of my favorites ever since I started getting into reptiles, and I first knew about black and white tegus. I knew that was the animal that I wanted to get, and although it took a couple of years, it's not as easy getting an animal that's going to get 4 feet and require an 8-foot enclosure. A couple years later, I think it was 3 years in the waiting, I finally was able to get my tegu, and it has been a joy here on out. You can see he's shedding, so he's not as beautiful as he usually is, but just an amazing animal. Currently he's going through what we like to call tegu puberty, so he's a little more of a rascal than usual, just that common tail whipping, being assertive, things like that. But come here, little buddy. But that's just something you need to expect with tegus when they go through their sexual maturity, and it's just something I'm going to keep on working with until he finally snaps out of it and those hormones balance back out. Here we have Pebbles. She's the first breeder I ever got. I got her at a local pet store as a sub-adult. She's what really kickstarted my interest in Tiger Dalmatians, just because of the beautiful stripes she has along with those Dalmatian spots. Now I did end up breeding Pebbles this year, and this was her first year breeding, so the eggs have not been that good. At this point, they are starting to look a lot better, and they are actually fertile. I do have one clutch of her ready to hatch in a few weeks, and another clutch that was just laid. That looks pretty good so far. My second Tiger Stripe Super Down now. She has been an amazing breeder this year, producing a bunch of eggs. Unfortunately, due to an incubator error now, most of those did not make it, but I do have a clutch that did hatch, which is looking amazing, and then a second clutch from her that is ready to go here in a few weeks. Now, a fun story with Xena is I actually found her at a local pet store back in New Hampshire where I was living at the time. She was only $60 for, this beautiful gecko, so I was kind of like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I ended up taking a day to sleep on it, and the next day I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go get the gecko. And I went over there, tried to get it, and she was gone. Well, it turned out that day that I decided to sleep on it, they ended up moving her from New Hampshire to Massachusetts. So I ended up driving an hour and a half into Mass in order to get this gecko, and honestly, I couldn't have been happier with that decision because she has just been amazing. Next we have another one of my OG reptiles, which is going to be Amo the crested gecko. He is the second reptile I've ever bought and has been with me for about 4 years now. Currently he's housed in an 18 by 18 by 24 Exoterra completely planted bioactive enclosure, and funny enough, this is actually the second bioactive enclosure I've ever made and the first tropical one that I've made. And you know, this thing's been going for about 2 or 3 years now with no issues. Now, the plants sometimes die because, as you guys know, I'm not very good at keeping plants alive, but I've never had to replace the soil. It's never gone bad. I do have to add from time to time just because it compacts. But other than filling the soil and changing over leaf litter for the cleanup crew, this thing has just been self-sustaining. So we saw the crested gecko breeders, now let's move on to the babies. And with me is going to be the first crested gecko I've ever hatched. Now, this one is the pair of Xena and the Super Dow male that I'll be showing a little later. And this guy just came out of the egg gorgeous. Tons of spots, and as we've come forward, you know, as he's grown a little bit, you can already see he's starting to get some ink blotting, and he's just beautiful. This guy is going to be my holdback just because he was the first gecko I've ever hatched, and I'm just really excited to see in the future what those spots are going to look like when he becomes an adult. And then next we have the clutch mate to that guy, which is going to be this Tiger Dalmatian. Now, just a funny thing is seeing how the one we saw before is already out of the egg with, you know, 20-30 spots, whereas this guy in the 6 weeks has only grown like 3 or 4. It's just really interesting when you pair two crested geckos together. You know, two Super Dalmatians are either going to get sometimes, you know, that full Super Dalmatian, and then sometimes you get a gecko with just a few spots. And then next to those babies, we have some grow outs for next season. This is going to be another Super Dalmatian who just has these beautiful, nice, big spots. I'm very excited next season to be pairing her with my Super Dal to try to get those babies with some nice ink blotting. And next to her, I have this tricolor partial pin that I'm very excited to be breeding. I'll be breeding her with Amo, my Harlequin partial pin, to hopefully get some, you know, tricolor partial pins or really cool looking Harlequins. Now, unfortunately, the way she's growing right now, I don't think she's going to be making weight by next season. She is a 2017 baby, but, you know, unless she really starts putting on the pounds with these next few months, I might just have to hold her back until the following. And then we have my beautiful male crested gecko breeder. This guy is just awesome. Plenty of Super Dow spots. He has those slight ink blotting, you know, not too big, but they're definitely bigger than the average spot. And then he also has some red spots as well. I was hoping down the road that with some of these clutches we could be hitting those red spots. You know, so far with the first clutch we did not, but hopefully, you know, this next clutch or the clutch after we'll be able to get some with red spots. And then moving forward, we have a few more frogs to look at. Now, with this Cuban tree frog, it has a great story. A few years back, I was working at this pet store where we got a contract for zoo med, so we were getting rid of all of our Exoterra cages, and with one of them, there was a tomato frog. Now, I don't see tomato frogs really too often, so I figured, yeah, you know, free Exoterra cage with a tomato frog, let's do it. So I ended up taking the tomato frog home, and about 2 days after that, it was around, you know, nighttime, 11, 12 o'clock, I'd hear some noise going on in the Exoterra, so I'm wondering, well, what's going on? I go to check it out, and in that upper right-hand corner, I see a Cuban tree frog in there. Now, I'm not too sure if the pet store purposely put the tree frog in there, if they just did not know it was in there and put the tomato frog in, if he somehow got in, I'm not sure. But the moral of that story is I got a 2-for-1 special. This guy's currently being housed in a 12 by 12 by 18 Zilla cage that originally the white tree frog came in, but I felt with this cage it was a little too small for a white tree frog, so I moved him over into the 10-gallon and put this little dude in here. And then coming to the last frog in my collection is going to be that tomato frog that I mentioned earlier. I really like this guy. You know, you don't see tomato frogs too often in the hobby, so it was really cool to pick him up. I really love the, you know, the mixes of that dark and light orange to almost a yellow. You know, it really does resemble a tomato. And then also he does have that great feeding response like the white tree frog I mentioned earlier, where he just is kind of grabbing at anything he can get his mouth onto. Now, if we have any fans on the channel, you guys are already going to know that this is the baby redhead crocodile skink enclosure from that step-by-step bioactive video. I'm pleased to say that this guy's been doing great in the time that he's been separated with his parents, eating pinhead crickets and nymph dubias. You know, he's still keeping the weight, and And then next to the baby red-eyed crocodile skink, we have another grow-out crested gecko. I got this guy at an expo about a year ago now as, you know, a really small baby. He had a couple of nice looking dowel spots, so I figured why not? And I picked him up with the intention of breeding him later on, and you know, as he's been growing, he's just knocked it out of the park. Tons of more spots. He has these big ink blots, and then also a bunch of red spots have been growing in as well. I am really excited in the next few seasons of growing him out and seeing what he or she can produce. You know, I'm not sure if it's actually a boy or a girl, but at this point we have some great looking females and we have a great looking male. So either way, we're gonna have some great looking babies from this guy. And then the last reptile on this shelf is going to be my fiance's crested gecko. Now, she got this guy at a local pet shop about 8 years ago, so he's going on about 9 or 10 years old, which is just awesome. I'm not going to take him out just because I don't know what it is, but he just does not like me. Whenever I go near the cage, he spazzes out, runs around, hits everything, so we're just going to leave him be, keep those stress levels down, and just enjoy him from the outside. And then the last reptile in this room is going to be, of course, my mountain horn dragons. Now, there's not too much else to say about these guys. I did do a whole video about them. They're still doing great. The eggs are looking awesome. I should have just a few more months before they hatch, and I'm really looking forward to having some baby mountain horn dragons. The funny thing about these guys is I think they are such an underrated reptile. You know, back when about a few years ago, I was like 18 or 19, I did own one. He was the chillest lizard I've ever had. Just climbs up on the shoulder, just hanging out. You know, I think if we could get this animal, you know, more into the hobby, we would have less wild caughts and more amazing calm captive breds. Well guys, with those mountain horn dragons, that is going to wrap up the reptile room tour. Now, leave me a comment in the comment section on what you guys thought about this tour. You know, I know we have a couple of crested geckos here, but I still think there's some cool stuff, like, you know, the tree boa and, of course, the chameleons. If you liked the video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up, and of course, if you want to follow some more of my animals or my breeding projects, you can always follow me on Instagram at DVCD Exotics, and as always guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.